Victoria Hale grabbed his arm, right there, in front of everyone, in the middle of the 42nd floor, her kingdom. She reached out and stopped him from walking into that elevator with her bare hand. Daniel froze. Nobody touched Victoria Hale. Nobody got close enough to try. She looked straight at him, not like a CEO, not like his boss, like a woman who had just heard something that cracked something open inside her chest and couldn't stop the damage in time. Is she better than me? 5 words, barely a whisper, but they landed like a verdict. The elevator doors closed without him. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if that moment just hit you somewhere deep, you already know what to do. Subscribe, because what happens next will shake you. Daniel Mercer did one thing that no one else on the 42nd floor ever did. He left on time, every single day. 5:15 without exception. Not 5:16. Not 5:14. 5:15. He closed his laptop, stacked his files with the quiet precision of a man who had learned that chaos lives in the small things you let slide. Buttoned his jacket and walked to the elevator. No lingering, no, just one more email. No drinks with the team on Fridays. People had theories. Some said he was interviewing elsewhere. Some said he had a second job. One of the junior analysts, a kid named Brendan, who said everything slightly too loud, once suggested Daniel was in witness protection, and somehow that rumor lived for 3 weeks before dying a quiet death at the coffee station. The truth was simpler and heavier. He had a son. His name was Noah. 7 years old, gap-toothed, obsessed with building Lego cities that sprawled across the living room floor like tiny civilizations waiting to be stepped on in the dark. Noah had his mother's eyes pale gray, the kind that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and his father's stubbornness, which showed up every night at bedtime like an unwelcome guest who never learned the social cue to leave. Daniel picked Noah up from school every day at 5:40. That left 25 minutes, 12 for the drive, 3 to park, 10 to walk in, find his son in the aftercare room, and watch Noah's face do that thing. That thing Daniel could not describe to anyone without his voice going somewhere he didn't want it to go. It was the only soft part of his day. He protected it like a man protecting the last match in a rainstorm. He had been at Hale Dynamics for 4 years. Senior Project Manager, Infrastructure Division. His performance reviews used words like exceptional, indispensable, remarkable under pressure. His direct supervisor, a cautious man named Greg Pollard, had once told him quietly, and with the tone of someone delivering news about a distant relative, that the CEO herself had flagged one of Daniel's restructuring proposals as the most coherent thing we've seen in 2 quarters. Daniel had nodded, said thank you, and gone back to his desk. He didn't care about impressing Victoria Hale. He didn't think about her in those terms. She existed at a different altitude, the kind of altitude where the air was thin and the decisions cost millions, and the expressions were carefully maintained at a temperature of precisely controlled neutrality. He had seen her in person exactly 7 times, counted not deliberately, but catalogued the way a careful mind catalogues things without being asked. She was striking. He wasn't blind. Tall, sharp-featured, with dark hair she wore in a style that suggested she had considered every detail and dismissed everything that wasn't necessary. She moved through a room like she had already decided what was going to happen before she arrived. People straightened when she walked past. Not from fear exactly, from something more complicated than fear. He just didn't think about her after 5:15, because at 5:15, he became someone else. A father. The only version of himself he still recognized. The day everything changed started the way every other day started. He came in at 7:45. He got coffee black, no sugar from the small machine by the stairwell that produced coffee slightly worse than the fancy machine in the main kitchen, but was never crowded. He sat down, opened his project files, and began working on the infrastructure migration timeline that had been quietly eating his mornings for the past 3 weeks. He worked through lunch. He answered 41 emails. He had 2 meetings back-to-back, both of which could have been documents but weren't, because this was corporate America, and meetings were the currency of feeling productive. By 3 o'clock, he was in the quiet stretch of his afternoon, that 2-hour window, where the building seemed to exhale slightly and the noise dropped, and he could actually think when Greg Pollard appeared at his office door with the expression of a man who had just been handed a problem slightly too large for his hands. "The quarterly integration report," Greg said. "Dunmore needs it cross-checked against the Copenhagen numbers before the board call Friday." "That's Terrence's file," Daniel said without looking up. "Terrence is in Copenhagen." Daniel looked up. "Then why isn't Terrence sending the Copenhagen numbers?" "Because Terrence is also the Copenhagen problem." Greg stepped in, lowered his voice, and delivered the entire situation in 30 seconds with the efficiency of a man who had learned that bad news delivered quickly was still bad news, but less bad. Terrence had made an error, a significant one. The kind that would surface on Friday and look very bad in front of the board unless someone competent went through 600 rows of data before end-of-day Thursday. Daniel looked at Greg. Greg looked back with the expression of a man holding a rope out over a very deep hole. "I leave at 5:15, Daniel said. "I know. That's not flexible. I know that too." Greg set the file folder on the corner of the desk. "I wouldn't ask if there was another option." Daniel looked at the folder. He thought about the aftercare room. He thought about Noah's face. Then he thought about what happened the last time a project surfaced on a Friday with errors no one had caught and who specifically was still blamed for it 18 months later. He opened the folder. "I can do 4 hours tonight," he said. "I'll finish it tomorrow morning before anyone else is in." Greg exhaled. "You're a lifesaver." "I'm a project manager," Daniel said, and went back to work. The next part. The part that changed everything happened at 5:12. He was closing files, stacking his things, going through the mechanical steps of departure that had become so practiced they required no conscious thought when his phone buzzed. A text. From a number he recognized but hadn't thought about in weeks. "Hey, still on for tomorrow?" He read it twice. Carol Ashby, his sister-in-law's college friend. They had been set up loosely by his sister-in-law Rachel at Christmas, in the way that well-meaning people set up widowed men by saying, "She's lovely, she's been through some things, I think you'd get along," and then following up on it with determined cheerfulness every few months until the logistics lined up through sheer persistence. He'd almost canceled twice. Once because Noah had a fever. Once because he couldn't find a reason to go that felt stronger than the reasons not to. He still couldn't find that reason. But he'd said yes. And Daniel Mercer, whatever else he was, kept his word. Yes, he typed back, 7 o'clock. He pocketed his phone, picked up his bag, and walked toward the elevator. The 42nd floor was still half occupied at 5:12. The kind of people who stayed late, who thought staying late was a visible form of dedication, who watched the elevator with mild expressions of judgment when others left before them. He pressed the button, waited. The door to the corner conference room, the glass one, the one that overlooked the entire floor, was open. Victoria Hale was inside. Not in a meeting. Just standing at the window with a tablet reading something the city behind her like a painting she wasn't looking at. She rarely came to this floor. When she did, it was always purposeful. Everything about the woman was purposeful. Daniel didn't look directly at her. The elevator arrived. He stepped toward it. And then he would never fully understand why he said it, because he was not a man who made unnecessary conversation, and he certainly did not make unnecessary conversation with Victoria Hale. But something small and human misfired in his normally careful brain, and he glanced sideways at the open doorway and said mildly to no one in particular, "I have a date tonight." It wasn't directed at her. It wasn't directed at anyone. It was the kind of sentence that sometimes escapes a quiet man when his guard has been down for 9 straight hours, and the small pleasant fact of a normal human life slips out before the gate closes. He stepped into the elevator. He pressed the lobby button, and in the half-second before the doors closed, he heard it faint, almost swallowed, but unmistakably her voice low and precise, and stripped of its professional distance in a way that landed in his chest before his brain could process it. Is she better than me? The doors closed. Daniel stood in the elevator as it descended facing forward and did not move. He picked Noah up at 5:42. 7 minutes late, which Noah noticed immediately with the precise indignation of a 7-year-old who has been waiting. "You're late," Noah said, arms crossed, backpack enormous relative to his small body. 2 minutes. 7. 2. Dad, I counted. Daniel crouched down, zipped Noah's jacket halfway up because it was April and still cold in the evenings, and looked at him. "You're right. I'm sorry. 7 minutes. Noah studied him with those gray eyes, assessing whether the apology was sufficient. Then he uncrossed his arms. "Ms. Patterson let me finish my Lego city while I waited." "That was nice of her." "It's a space colony now," Noah said, walking beside him. "It was just a city last week, but I added the launch pad." "When did you add the launch pad?" "Tuesday. I used the red pieces from the old pirate set." Daniel reached down and took his hand the small warm grip, automatic and grounding. "Tell me about the launch pad." And Noah did. All the way to the car, all through the drive home, through dinner, macaroni with the specific brand of cheese sauce that was the only acceptable brand, a boundary Noah had established at age 5 and defended with absolute consistency through bath time, through the 17-minute negotiation over how many Lego cities could be displayed simultaneously, before some had to be archived, through bedtime, through the glass of water, through the question about whether space colonies would need dogs, and if so, could they get one, through the final settled quiet of a child asleep. Daniel sat on the edge of Noah's bed for a moment in the dark. The apartment was silent. He thought about tomorrow, about Carol Ashby and a restaurant, and the quiet effort of being a version of himself that didn't exist between 5:15 and 7:45. He thought about the elevator. He thought about 4 words spoken almost carelessly, and the 5 that had come back through closing doors, unguarded and strange. "Is she better than me?" Victoria Hale had never once spoken to him outside of a formal context. She didn't know him. Not really. She knew his file, his performance record. Whatever Greg had told her about the Copenhagen situation. She didn't know about Noah's space colony. She didn't know about the macaroni brand. She didn't know about his wife, about Claire, about the Tuesday morning 3 years ago, when the world had rearranged itself into a before and an after, and Daniel Mercer had walked out of a hospital room and driven home and sat in the driveway for 45 minutes because he could not figure out how to go inside without her already being there. Victoria Hale knew none of that. And yet, is she better than me? He stood up, walked to his bedroom, sat on the edge of his own bed in his own dark room and stared at the floor for a moment. Then he picked up his phone. There were 3 new emails from work. A text from Rachel asking how he was doing, which she sent every 2 weeks on a schedule so reliable he could set a calendar reminder. A notification from Noah's school about a field trip form. And at the very bottom of the notification screen, time-stamped 6:47 p.m., almost an hour after he'd left a text from a number not saved in his contacts. He opened it. "How's the Lego architect?" He stared at it. There was only one person who had mentioned Noah today, and that was him for approximately 45 seconds in a conversation with Greg that had happened in the hallway outside the conference room, the glass conference room, at 4:30. His hands were very still. He typed back slowly, each word deliberate. "How did you get this number?" The reply came in under 10 seconds. "I'm the CEO. I get numbers." And then before he could respond, "I'm asking about your son, not interrogating you." There's a difference. He put the phone down on the nightstand. Picked it up again. Put it down. He was a man who had survived grief by building walls of routine high enough and thick enough that nothing unexpected could scale them without effort. Whatever this was, it was already inside the wall, and he had no protocol for that. He arrived at work the next morning at 7:45. He got his coffee from the bad machine by the stairwell. He sat down, opened the Terrence file, and began working through 600 rows of data, with the focused silence of a man who understood that the work had to come first, because the work was the thing he could control. At 9:03, his office door opened. He didn't look up. It would be Greg with a follow-up question, or Brendan with something that could have been an email. "The Copenhagen margins are wrong," said a voice that was not Greg and was not Brendan. He looked up. Victoria Hale was standing in his doorway with a tablet in one hand and a coffee cup in the other, her coffee from the good machine, and she was looking at the file on his desk with the expression of someone who had already done the math before walking in. "Row 412, she said. "The exchange rate they applied is from Q3. The board will notice that inside 30 seconds. Daniel looked at her, then at his screen, then back at her. "I hadn't gotten to that section yet," he said. "I know. I came to tell you before you did." She stepped inside without being invited, set her tablet on the corner of his desk. "Pull up the live rate for the Danish krone, apply it to the Copenhagen column, and recalculate the net projection. It'll take you about 20 minutes if you do it correctly the first time." He looked at her for a long moment. "You came down here to tell me that." "I came down here," she said, pulling a chair out and sitting down across from him without asking, "because I read the file this morning and the error is fixable, and I don't want it to surface Friday." She picked up her coffee. "And because I owe you an explanation." The office was very quiet. "For last night," she said. She held the cup with both hands and looked at him with an expression that was not quite the expression she wore in boardrooms. Something slightly less armored. "What I said, in the doorway, that was—" She paused. Considered her words the way she appeared to consider everything precisely without waste. "Unprofessional." "It was unexpected," Daniel said carefully. "That's a generous word for it. I don't know that it needs a word at all." Something shifted in her face. Not much, a fraction of something. Most people would have made a great deal of it. "I'm not most people." "No," she said. "You're not." She looked at the file again. "You're the only person on this floor who leaves at 5:15, regardless of what's happening. You've done it for 4 years. Pollard thinks it's a personal boundary. Accounting thinks you're interviewing somewhere. The analysts have a theory involving—" She stopped. "It doesn't matter what the analysts think." "Witness protection," Daniel said. She blinked. Then, barely, almost imperceptibly, the corner of her mouth moved. "That's the one." "It's not inaccurate," he said. "In certain lights." She looked at him then, not the way a CEO looks at an employee, something more direct than that. The kind of look that had nothing professional behind it, that was simply one person taking the measure of another without the usual intermediaries. "Your son," she said. "How old?" "7. "What's his name?" "Noah." She nodded slowly like she was filing it. "And his mother?" The air in the room changed. Daniel kept his face still. "She died 3 years ago." Victoria did not say, "I'm sorry." Most people said "I'm sorry" reflexively, the way people reached for the nearest available phrase when something true and heavy entered the room. She didn't. She just looked at him, and the look said that she understood not the particulars, but the weight, and that she wasn't going to cover it with noise. "Go fix row 412, she said finally. She stood, picked up her tablet. "And Daniel." He looked up. "For what it's worth," she said at the door, not quite looking back at him. "The question I asked last night." A pause. It wasn't professional, but it wasn't nothing either. She walked out. He sat at his desk. Outside his window, the city was doing what the city always did, indifferent, continuous, loud in its silence. He pulled up the Copenhagen column, applied the correct exchange rate, and tried with limited success to think about nothing else. He had a date at 7, and he had no idea why that fact, which had been simple and neutral and slightly inconvenient 48 hours ago, now felt like the most complicated thing in the room. The date was at 7. Daniel knew that, had known it for 3 days, had written it in his phone calendar with the same detached efficiency he applied to everything else in his life. Dinner, 7 p.m. Carla Marcello's on 5th, and had not thought about it again until this morning when the reminder buzzed and he'd looked at it and felt approximately nothing. That was the honest truth of it. Not dread, not excitement, nothing. The emotional equivalent of a blank page. He'd told himself that was normal, that it took time, that Rachel meant well, and Carla sounded perfectly decent on paper, and that a man who had been alone for 3 years owed it to himself, owed it to Noah, even to at least try. He believed all of that intellectually, the way you believe something that someone sensible told you, and you stored it because it sounded true, even if it didn't feel like anything yet. What he had not accounted for was Victoria Hale, grabbing his arm in front of the entire 42nd floor and asking a question that had no professional justification and no clean explanation, and had been living in the back of his skull ever since, like a splinter he couldn't reach. He sat at his desk now, row 412, corrected Copenhagen numbers, reconciled board presentation, technically sound, and stared at his screen without reading a single word on it. His phone was face down on the desk. He didn't pick it up. At 10:47 it buzzed. He picked it up. "You're staring at your screen, but you stopped typing 11 minutes ago. Either the file is finished or something is wrong with it." He turned around slowly in his chair, looked across the floor toward the glass conference room. It was occupied now, 4 people, a presentation projected on the wall, nobody paying attention to him. He looked up. The corner office on the 42nd floor had a window that faced out over the open workspace, a detail he had registered 4 years ago and filed away under architecture irrelevant. Victoria Hale was standing at that window with her phone in her hand, not looking at the people in her conference room, looking at him. He looked back. She didn't move. He typed back, "The file is finished. 3 seconds. Then why aren't you working?" He put the phone down, picked it up again. "Why are you watching me work?" The reply took longer this time. He watched the window. She turned slightly, said something to someone inside her office. He couldn't see, turned back. "I'm not watching you work. I'm watching you not work. There's a difference." He almost smiled. He caught it before it happened, which was a reflex he'd developed so thoroughly over the past 3 years that he almost didn't recognize what it was anymore. "I have a meeting at 11, he typed. "Is there something you actually need?" This time the pause was long enough that he thought she might be done. He turned back to his screen and started opening the next project file, the one for the Seattle integration that was 2 weeks out and needed preliminary scoping. The buzz came when he had almost settled back into the work. "Tonight." "Are you nervous?" He set the phone down on his desk very carefully. He was a private person. Privately and thoroughly private in the way that people become when grief teaches them that the interior life is the one space nobody can take from you if you don't hand it over. He didn't talk about Claire with colleagues. He didn't explain Noah's school schedule, or the Lego cities, or the macaroni brand, or any of the 1,000 small rituals that constituted the life he had rebuilt with quiet and deliberate care after everything collapsed. He had said 4 words in a hallway. "I have a date." Careless, unguarded, the product of a long day and a loosened gate. And somehow from those 4 words Victoria Hale had built a doorway and walked through it, and was now standing in the middle of something he had not opened up to anyone. He typed, "That's not a professional question." Her response came immediately, as if she had been waiting for exactly that. "No, it's not." He stared at it. Then, "You can tell me it's not my business." And then before he could, "But you haven't." He went to the meeting at 11. Sat through 50 minutes of infrastructure discussion with the competence of a man who could do this particular kind of work in his sleep, which was lucky because some portion of his brain was somewhere else entirely. Greg caught up with him in the hallway afterward. "Board's happy with the revised Copenhagen numbers," Greg said, with the relief of a man who had survived something. "Good," Daniel said. Hale flagged the fix herself, said it was clean. Greg glanced at him sideways. "She doesn't usually come down to the floor, you know. Direct intervention like that." "I know. Just saying, that's not nothing." "I heard you, Greg." Greg adjusted his glasses. You doing anything tonight? The team is going to. I have plans, Daniel said. Right, yeah. Greg stopped himself, recovered. Okay, enjoy. Daniel walked back to his desk and sat down and opened the Seattle file and did not look toward the corner office window. At 12:30, his phone buzzed. Lunch. He looked at it for a full 10 seconds. I eat at my desk, he typed back. I know. I'm asking you not to. Today. He should have said no. He had a very clear list of reasons why no was the correct answer, starting with she is my CEO, and ending with this is how things get complicated in ways that cannot be uncomplicated, and every reason between those two was equally sound. He picked up his jacket. She was already there when he arrived at the small Italian place 2 blocks from the building. Not a power lunch restaurant. Not the kind of place where deals got made and people ordered things they'd expense without reading the menu. A small place. 8 tables. The kind of menu that was 1 laminated page and didn't need to be more. She was sitting in the back corner with a water and a bread basket and no phone in her hand, which was, he realized, the first time he had seen her without a device in immediate reach. She looked different, not dramatically, just slightly less assembled, like someone who had taken off 1 layer they usually wore. He sat down across from her. You came, she said. You asked. People don't always come when I ask. I find that hard to believe. They come when I tell them to, she said. It's different. Asking is different. She looked at the bread basket. I don't actually ask people things very often. He picked up the menu, read it without seeing it. I've noticed. What does that mean? You came to my office this morning with the row 412 error, he said. You didn't ask if I had time. You didn't ask if I had already found it. You walked in, told me the problem, told me the solution, sat down. She was quiet for a moment. Would you have preferred I ask? He thought about it honestly. No, he said. It was efficient. I appreciated it. See? She said. That's the thing about you. He looked up from the menu. What is? You say the true thing, she said. Without decoration. It was efficient. I appreciated it. Not, oh no, it was fine. I was glad for the help, the actual thing. She broke a piece of bread. Most people don't do that. Most people are trying to manage the relationship, he said. I don't have enough energy for that. She looked at him then with something sharp and real behind her eyes. Because of your son. Because of a lot of things. She nodded. Didn't push. He noticed that she had a quality he hadn't expected, a capacity to hear the edge of something and not try to cut past it. She filed it and moved. Tell me about him, she said. Noah. The name in her mouth was strange. She'd remembered it from this morning, from one mention, filed it, and kept it. He's 7, Daniel said. He builds Lego cities. He's currently developing a space colony using pieces from 3 different sets, which is architecturally ambitious for a 2nd grader. Something crossed her face, quick and unguarded, and gone before she could manage it. Something warm. He sounds like a serious person. He is. He has opinions about cheese sauce brands. Strong ones, I assume. Immovable. She almost laughed. Not quite. The corners of her eyes moved. Does he know about tonight? Daniel set the menu down. He knows I'm going to dinner. He asked if I was getting a new friend. I said maybe. What did he say to that? He said I should bring home dessert either way. This time she did laugh. Brief and genuine and completely unperformed, and it landed in the room like something that hadn't been planned and wasn't sorry about it. It changed her face entirely. Made her look like a different person. Or maybe the same person without the architecture she'd spent years building around herself. The waiter came. They ordered. Simple things. Neither of them looked at the menu very long. When the waiter left, Victoria set her water down and looked at the table for a moment before looking back at him. Can I ask you something? She said. You've been asking me things for 14 hours. A different kind of something. He waited. When you said it, she said. Yesterday. I have a date. Were you saying it to me, or was it? No, he said. It wasn't directed at you. It wasn't directed at anyone. It was just... He paused. Tried to find the honest version. A long day, a loose moment. I wasn't thinking. She nodded slowly. Were you hoping it was directed at you? He asked. The question surprised her. He could tell by the fraction of stillness that moved through her before she recovered. She was good at recovery. But he'd been watching people his whole life, and grief had made him sharper about the things people tried not to show. I don't know, she said. Which was, he was fairly certain, the most honest thing she'd said all week. The question you asked, he said. In the doorway. She looked at the breadbasket. Is she better than me? He said, keeping his voice level and quiet. What did that mean? Actually. A long pause. Long enough that the ambient noise of the restaurant expanded into it, the clink of glasses, someone laughing at another table, the door opening and closing. I don't know that either, she said finally. I heard you say it and something moved, before I could stop it. She looked up. I don't lose control of things I say. That's not... She stopped. It's not something that happens to me. It happened yesterday. Yes. In front of the entire floor. Yes, I'm aware. She said it without embarrassment, which surprised him. Not dismissive, just clear. It happened. It's a fact. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. I'm sure Brendan has already constructed a theory. 3 probably, Daniel said. She looked at him steadily. Does it bother you? What I said. He considered that with the same care he gave everything. It surprised me, he said. It's been living in my head since yesterday, which is different from being bothered. What's the difference? Bothered means I want it to stop, he said. Living in my head just means it's there. She was quiet. Why me? He asked. Not aggressively. Just the real question, the one at the center of all of this. There are 300 people in this building. You don't know me. You know my file. You know my performance reviews. Yesterday morning you had probably said 6 words to me in 4 years. 7, she said. He blinked. I counted, she said. After, last night. A pause. I know that's strange. It is strange. I know. She turned the water glass in her hands. The day you started here 4 years ago, first week, you were in a meeting that ran over. Conference room B. I was walking past. The door was open. Greg was presenting something that was wrong, and you knew it was wrong, and you let him finish, and then you said... She stopped, chose her words. You said, I think we should look at this differently. Here's why. And you were right. And Greg knew you were right. And you didn't make him feel stupid for being wrong. She looked at him. That's not common. He didn't have anything to say to that. I noticed you, she said. In the peripheral sense. The way you notice something true in a building full of managed impressions. She set the glass down. And then time passed and you were just there, doing the work, leaving at 5:15, doing the work better than anyone. And I told myself it was professional respect and left it in that category. Until yesterday. Until yesterday. The food arrived. They ate in silence for a moment that was not uncomfortable, which was its own strange thing, because silence with someone you barely know is usually its own kind of pressure. Can I ask you something now? Daniel said. Yes. Do you do this? Have lunch with your employees? No. Do you text them at night? No. Do you grab their arms in hallways? She put her fork down. I've never done any of this before, she said. Any of it. In 11 years. Not once. She held his gaze. I don't know what that means. I'm telling you because you ask the true thing, and I'm trying to answer in kind. He looked at her, this woman who ran a company with 3,000 employees and a quarterly revenue that had 7 zeros, and who sat across from him in a small Italian restaurant and admitted she didn't know what she was doing and felt something shift in his chest. Not romantic, not yet. Something prior to that. The recognition of a person who was being real in a moment when it would have been much easier not to be. Tonight, he said. After. I'll tell you how it went. She looked at him carefully. You don't have to do that. I know, he said. I'm offering. Something moved in her face again, that quick, unguarded thing she hadn't learned to fully suppress. Okay, she said. Okay. They finished lunch. Walked back to the building 2 blocks without speaking, which should have been awkward, and wasn't. At the elevator, she stepped in, and he stepped in, and she pressed 42, and he pressed 42, and neither of them said anything about the fact that they'd just spent an hour in a way that had no professional name. The doors opened. She walked out first, then stopped. Daniel? She said without turning fully around. Yeah, for the record. A pause. A breath. I hope it goes well. Tonight. Another pause shorter. I also hope it doesn't, which I recognize is contradictory and not particularly kind of me. She walked toward her office. He stood there for a moment. Then he walked to his desk, sat down, opened the Seattle file, and spent the next 4 hours doing the best work he'd done all week. Because the alternative was sitting with the fact that the most controlled, most untouchable, most deliberately armored person he had ever met had just told him in plain and honest language that she was rooting against his date, and that some part of him, the part that had been quiet for 3 years, the part that lived behind the routine and the 5:15 departures, and the macaroni brand and the Lego cities, that part had heard her say it, and felt for the first time in a very long time, something that wasn't nothing. Marcello's on 5th was the kind of restaurant that tried hard enough to feel romantic without being obvious about it. Warm light, close tables, a wine list that was longer than it needed to be. Daniel arrived 4 minutes early, which was habit, and stood near the entrance and checked his phone, and told himself he was not thinking about a text he hadn't sent yet. He was thinking about it. Carla Simmons was already inside. He spotted her from the doorway. Dark hair, a green dress, sitting at a corner table, with her hands folded and a small polite smile that she'd clearly been holding for at least 2 minutes. She was attractive, warm-faced, the kind of person who looked like they were good at making other people feel comfortable, which was objectively a quality worth having. He walked in. She stood. They did the small, careful choreography of a first meeting handshake that became a half hug, both of them deciding simultaneously that a handshake was too formal, and executing the correction with equal parts goodwill and mild awkwardness. Daniel, she said, it's so good to finally. Rachel has told me so much. Good things, I hope, he said, which was the thing people said, and he sat down and picked up the menu and told himself to be present, to be here, to give this a real chance the way a reasonable man would. Mostly good things, Carla said with a small laugh. She did warn me you were quiet. She's not wrong. Quiet isn't bad. My ex-husband talked constantly, about himself mostly. She said it lightly with the practiced ease of someone who had told that particular story enough times that it no longer had edges. Rachel said you work in tech. Infrastructure management, he said. Project side, not engineering. Do you love it? The question caught him slightly, not because it was complicated, but because it was real. Not what do you do, not how long have you been there, but do you love it, which was a different kind of question entirely. I'm good at it, he said honestly. That's not the same thing, but I respect the difference, and I've made peace with it. She tilted her head. That's a very honest answer. I've been told that's a pattern, she smiled, genuine this time. I teach 4th grade, she said. I love it. Most days it tries to kill me and I love it anyway. I think that's the only real definition of loving something. Noah would agree with you, he said. And then because the name had come out before he'd made a decision about it, he said, my son, he's 7. He has strong opinions about most things. Something happened in Carla's face. Subtle. A small recalibration, the kind that happens behind the eyes before it reaches the expression. She covered it quickly with interest that was genuine enough, but slightly more careful than it had been 30 seconds ago. Rachel mentioned, she said, That you have a son. She did, briefly. Carla picked up her wineglass, which she hadn't touched yet, and turned it once. She said you were raising him alone, that his mother passed. 3 years ago, Daniel said. He said it the way he always said it, clear, unadorned, without the performance of grief that some people seemed to need from him as confirmation that he had properly felt it. He had felt it. He didn't need to demonstrate it. I'm sorry, Carla said. And she meant it, he could tell. She was a kind person. That was clear and real. Thank you, he said. The waiter came. They ordered. The conversation moved easily enough, pleasantly enough. She told him about a student who had written an essay about why dinosaurs were better than people, which was objectively a strong argument, and Daniel said so, and she laughed, and for a little while it felt like two adults having a normal dinner, which was what it was supposed to be. But he noticed somewhere around the midpoint of the meal that she asked about Noah exactly once more after that first mention. And she asked in a way that was careful, polite, brief, moving on quickly, like she was navigating around something she hadn't decided how to handle yet. He noticed. He didn't say anything. He kept the conversation going because he was a man who understood that fairness meant giving things a real chance before arriving at conclusions, and one dinner was not a conclusion. It was over. The dessert menu, neither of them had really looked at it, which was its own small signal that Carla set her menu down and looked at him with the expression of someone who had been building to something for the past 40 minutes and had finally decided to say it. Can I be honest with you? She said. Please, he said. I think you're... She paused, chose carefully. I think you're a remarkable person. I can tell that in about an hour, which is actually faster than usual for me. I'm hearing a but, he said. You're hearing a but, she confirmed. She wasn't cruel about it. She was exactly as kind as he'd read her to be, and the kindness made it cleaner somehow, not harder. Your life it's full, in a real way. Noah, the grief, the routine you've built around all of it. I can see it in how you talk about him. The whole shape of your life is built around something that She stopped. I have my own shape, and I'm not sure they fit. You decided that in an hour, he said, not bitterly, just noting it. I know how that sounds. She looked at him steadily. But I think you knew it too, somewhere in the first 20 minutes, and you were being too decent to say it. He looked at her for a moment. You're not wrong, he said. She exhaled. A small relieved sound, like something that had been held in tension had been let go. Rachel is going to be furious with me. She'll recover. She'll make me feel terrible for a month. Probably 2, he said. She's persistent. Carla laughed real this time, the full version. I'm sorry, Daniel. I genuinely am. You deserve... She stopped. Tried again. Someone is going to be very lucky. That's a true thing, and I mean it. Thank you, he said. And he meant it too. Not as a courtesy. As an acknowledgement that she had been honest and clean, and had not made this smaller than it was, or larger than it needed to be. They split the check. Another small negotiation conducted with mutual goodwill and no drama. Outside on the sidewalk, they hugged a real one, this time no ambiguity, and she walked to her car and he stood there for a moment in the April air. He was not devastated. That was the honest truth of it. He had been here before, not this exact shape of it, but this feeling. The quiet, settling acknowledgement that something hadn't worked, and that the world continued regardless. He had survived things that were catastrophically larger than a first date, that ended politely, and his nervous system had learned to scale its responses accordingly. He stood on the sidewalk. He thought about what she'd said. Your life is full, in a real way. And he thought, yes, it is. And he had never thought of that as the problem. He had thought of it as the thing he had built when everything else was taken, and he had built it well, and it was real, and it was his. And if it made the geometry of fitting someone new into it complicated, then that was just the truth of things, and he had made his peace with it. He pulled out his phone. He had one new text, sent 12 minutes ago, the number he had not saved, but now knew. How's it going? He looked at it, looked at the restaurant door behind him, looked at the street. He typed, It's over. The reply came in 4 seconds. What happened? She's a good person, he typed. It just wasn't right. A pause. Longer than the previous ones. He could imagine her on the other end, wherever she was, whatever she was doing at 8:45 on a Thursday night, reading that and processing it with the same precise efficiency she applied to everything. Then, where are you? He looked up at the street sign, typed the intersection. Stay there, she wrote back. I'm coming. He stared at his phone. He typed, You don't have to do that. I know, she replied. Stay there. He waited 17 minutes. He knew because he checked twice and then made himself stop checking and just stood there on the sidewalk with his hands in his jacket pockets and watched the city do what cities do at 9 o'clock on a Thursday. Taxis and couples, and someone walking a dog, and the ordinary human machinery of a night that didn't know or care what he was standing in the middle of. The car that pulled up was not a CEO's car, which was his first thought. It was a dark sedan, clean but unremarkable. And she stepped out without ceremony, without the controlled public presentation he associated with her in dark slacks and a simple gray top, and her hair down, not the precise professional arrangement he'd seen every day for 4 years, but just hair the way a person wears it when they're not performing anything for anyone. She looked like herself. He realized standing there that he had never seen her look like herself before. You didn't have to come, he said. You said that already, she said. Via text. My answer is the same. She looked at him. Not his tie, not his file, not his performance review. Just at him, his face, the actual state of it. Are you okay? Yes, he said. Genuinely. I'm okay. You don't look devastated. I'm not. He looked at her. Does that seem strange? It seems honest, she said. Which is not the same as strange. For you. She glanced at the restaurant door. Was she terrible? No, she was kind. She was honest. She decided my life was too complicated for her inside of an hour. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Her loss, she said. Not as comfort, not as performance. Just flatly as a statement of fact. Maybe, he said. Not maybe. He looked at her. You drove here to tell me that. I drove here, she said, because I didn't want you standing on a sidewalk alone after that. Which is... She stopped. I'm aware of what that says. What does it say? She met his eyes. That the line between professional and personal has been compromised. She said it directly without flinching from it. On my end, significantly. He didn't say anything. The honesty of it sat in the air between them, neither comfortable nor uncomfortable, just real. There's a place down the block, she said. Coffee, if you want. Or you can go home, obviously. You probably want to get back to Noah. He's at Rachel's tonight, Daniel said. She takes him on my... He stopped. On nights when I have plans. Ah, she said. Coffee is fine, he said. They walked. 2 blocks, the April air slightly warmer than it had been, the sidewalk narrow enough that they walked close without meaning to. She didn't fill the silence with noise. He had noticed that about her across 2 days of increasingly strange interactions. She was not afraid of quiet. She lived in it the way he did, by choice and practice, rather than discomfort. The coffee place was small. Late night, the kind that survived on people who needed somewhere to be. They took a corner table. She ordered black coffee. He ordered the same. The symmetry was small and went unremarked. Tell me about her, Victoria said. What happened, actually? He told her, plainly in the order it had happened without editorializing. Carla's warmth, the question about Noah, the subtle recalibration, the honest conversation over the dessert menu neither of them had opened. Victoria listened. All the way through without interrupting, which was a quality he recognized as rarer than it should be. When he finished, she said, She told you that you were remarkable. Yes. And then didn't stay to find out if she was right about that. People are allowed to make that call, he said. My life is, she wasn't wrong. It is full. It is complicated. Noah is the center of it, and that's not going to change, and it shouldn't. I'm not criticizing her, Victoria said. I'm just... She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. I'm noting it, as a fact. Why? She looked at him steadily. Because I want to understand the shape of the thing, your life, the actual shape of it. A pause. Not because I'm your CEO, not because of the Copenhagen file or the board call or any of that. She held his gaze. Because I've been thinking about you since yesterday morning in a way that has nothing to do with any of that, and I am not in the habit of lying to myself about what things are. The coffee shop was quiet around them. Someone typing on a laptop in the corner. The low sound of something playing through a speaker that was too small for the room. Victoria, he said. I know, she said quickly. I know what the complications are. I am very aware of the structure of this situation and what it means and what it cannot be, and I was going to say, he said that I appreciated you coming tonight. She stopped. He paused, found the honest version. I've been doing everything alone for 3 years, not because I wanted to, because I didn't know how to ask for something I couldn't name. He looked at her. You showed up on a sidewalk at 9 o'clock on a Thursday for no reason that makes any professional sense. That means something. She was very still. I don't know what it means yet, he said. I'm not saying I do. I'm saying it means something. She looked at her coffee cup. Looked at him. My fiancé died, she said. It came out like that, not preceded by anything, not part of any larger sentence. Just dropped into the space between them with the weight of something that had been carried a very long time without being set down. He didn't move. He waited. 6 years ago, she said. He was a pilot, a small plane, a storm that the forecast said would hold until evening and didn't. She said it in the same flat, unadorned way he talked about Claire. The voice of someone who has told themselves this story so many times that they have stripped all the performance out of it. And what's left is just the raw, irreducible fact of what happened. We'd been engaged for 8 months. I was 31. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it the way she'd meant it when she said it to him, not as a courtesy, as an acknowledgement. She nodded. I went back to work 4 days later, she said. People thought it was strength. It wasn't strength. It was, I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Work was the thing I could control, so I worked. She looked at him. I've been working ever since. 11 years, he said. 11 years, she confirmed. The company tripled in revenue. I am very good at what I do. She said it without pride, just as information. And I am... She stopped. I am very alone, in a way that I had stopped noticing until about 48 hours ago, when a man I've watched from a corner window for 4 years said 4 words I wasn't expecting, and something in me. She pressed her lips together. Something cracked open that I hadn't realized was still sealed. The laptop person in the corner closed their computer and left. The coffee shop was nearly empty now. We're the same, Daniel said. Not as a revelation he'd felt it building since lunch, maybe since the elevator doors had closed 2 days ago. That's what this is. Yes, she said. I think that's exactly what this is. 2 people who survived something unsurvivable by building a life so controlled that nothing unexpected could get inside it. Yes, and then something unexpected got inside anyway. She looked at him for a long moment. Yes. He picked up his coffee, drank it, set it down. I should get home, he said. Noah's at Rachel's, but I told her 10:30. Of course. She picked up her jacket. Daniel. She said his name the way she'd said it twice before in his office on the sidewalk, like she was deciding something every time. I don't know what this is either. To be clear, I'm not sitting here with a plan. I don't have a plan for this. That makes 2 of us, he said. Is that okay? He looked at her. This woman, who had navigated 11 years of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions, and had arrived at this moment without a plan, sitting in a small coffee shop at 9:45 on a Thursday, asking a man she'd watched from a corner window if it was okay to not know what came next. "Yeah," he said. "That's okay." They walked out. On the sidewalk, she turned toward her car, and he turned toward the subway, and they stood for a moment at the point where the directions divided. "Text me when you get home," she said. He looked at her. "So I know you got back safely," she said. Then after a beat, "I'm aware of how that sounds." "It sounds," he said, "like something a person says when they care about another person." She didn't answer that, but she didn't look away either, and in the space where the answer would have been, there was something that needed no translation. He turned and walked toward the subway. He didn't look back, but at the corner, he took out his phone, and he typed before he'd even descended the steps. "I'll text you when I get home." Her reply came before the train arrived. "Good." And then a moment later, one more word, "Daniel." He waited. "I'm glad it didn't work out tonight." He stood on the platform with his phone in his hand and the train 2 minutes out, and something happening in his chest that he hadn't felt in 3 years. Something that wasn't grief, wasn't routine, wasn't the careful architecture of a life built to survive. Something that felt terrifyingly and quietly like the beginning of something. He texted her when he got home. Home. One word. No punctuation. The kind of text a person sends when they're tired and honest and not performing anything for anyone. Her reply came in under a minute. "Good. Sleep well." He stood in his kitchen in the dark and read it twice, and then put the phone face down on the counter and made himself a glass of water and drank it standing up, which was something he did when he needed to be in his body instead of his head. Claire used to tease him about it. "You drink water like it's a decision," she'd say. "Like you have to commit to it." He thought about that. Thought about how grief worked, how it didn't announce itself anymore, after 3 years didn't arrive with the full weight of the early days, but lived instead in small ambushes. A glass of water in a dark kitchen. A 7-year-old's gray eyes. The specific silence of an apartment at 10:15, when the person who used to fill it was gone. He went to bed, slept better than he expected to. In the morning, he picked Noah up from Rachel's before school. Noah arrived at the door with his backpack already on and his shoes on the wrong feet, which was a choice he made regularly and defended with the argument that it felt more balanced, which was Daniel had decided long ago, not worth the fight. "How was the dinner?" Noah asked from the back seat. "Fine," Daniel said. "Did you make a friend?" "Not exactly." "Did you get dessert?" "I forgot." Noah processed this. "So it didn't go well." "You're 7, Daniel said. "When did you get this perceptive?" "Ms. Patterson says I have high emotional IQ," Noah said with the satisfaction of someone quoting a credential. "What does that mean?" "It means you're going to make a very good therapist someday." "I want to be an architect," Noah said. "For space colonies." "You can be both." Noah considered this as Daniel pulled up to the school. He leaned forward between the front seats with his chin on the headrest, which was something Daniel had told him not to do approximately 40 times and had given up on entirely. "Dad," he said. "Yeah." "It's okay if you make friends. I won't be weird about it." Daniel looked at him in the rearview mirror, at those gray eyes, serious and 7, and somehow already older than they should have to be. "I know," Daniel said. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Noah said with the gravity of someone granting a significant concession. He opened the door. "Also, your tie is crooked." It was crooked. Daniel fixed it in the rear view after Noah disappeared through the school doors, and then sat there for an extra 30 seconds doing nothing in particular. You won't be weird about it. 7 years old, and already carrying the weight of his father's loneliness, like it was something he'd assigned himself to fix. That was the thing about grief, Daniel thought. It didn't stay inside the person it happened to. It radiated outward quietly and settled on the people nearby. And the people nearby absorbed it because they loved you and didn't know what else to do with it. He drove to work. The first thing he noticed when he got off the elevator at 7:49 was that the glass conference room was empty and dark. The second thing he noticed was that Greg Pollard was standing near the coffee station with the expression of a man who had information he was deciding whether to share. Daniel got his coffee from the bad machine. Greg materialized beside him. "Board call went well," Greg said. "This morning, 6 a.m. Hale presented the Copenhagen numbers. Clean, no questions." "Good," Daniel said. She credited the revision to the infrastructure team. Greg paused. "Specifically, you by name. To the board." Daniel looked at him. "That's unusual." "That's extremely unusual," Greg said. "In 11 years, I have never heard her attribute a specific fix to a specific person in a board call." He adjusted his glasses. "Brendan has a new theory." "I don't want to know." "Probably wise," Greg said. "How was last night?" "Fine," Daniel said. Same word he'd given Noah. Same flat, honest, undramatic container for something that was more complicated than fine, but didn't need to be announced. "The date, I mean." "I know what you meant, Greg." Greg looked at him with the patience of a man who had worked with Daniel long enough to understand that pushing produced nothing and waiting sometimes produced something. He waited. "It didn't work out," Daniel said. "She was a good person. It just didn't fit." "I'm sorry," Greg said. "Don't be. It was fine." He picked up his coffee. "The Seattle scope needs preliminary numbers by end of day. I'm going to need the vendor contracts from procurement." Greg blinked at the pivot. "Recovered. I'll get them to you by noon." Daniel went to his desk. At 9:07 his phone buzzed. "How's the space colony, architect?" He looked at it, looked at his screen, looked back at it. On the wrong side of his shoes, but otherwise operational, he typed, "Board call went well." "I know, I was there. I heard you mentioned my name." A pause. "Is that a problem?" "No. It surprised me. You did the work. The board should know who did the work." A shorter pause. "Also, I wanted to." He set the phone down, picked it up. "Victoria." "Yes. What are we doing?" The pause this time was the longest yet. Long enough that he put the phone down and opened the Seattle file and began reading procurement language with approximately 15% of his available attention. The buzz came 4 minutes later. "I've been asking myself that since yesterday. I don't have a clean answer." And then immediately after, "Can we have dinner tonight?" Not lunch. Dinner. Off the clock. No professional reason. He read it twice. "Noah," he typed. "Bring him," she wrote back. If that's okay, I'd like to meet him. If that's not too fast, I'd like to meet him." He put the phone down on his desk and looked at it like it was a document he was trying to understand. Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Dynamics, architect of 11 years of controlled, armored, impeccably managed professional distance, was asking to have dinner with his 7-year-old son. He picked up the phone. "It's not too fast," he typed. "But I should warn you, he will ask you hard questions." "I work with a board of directors," she replied. "I can handle a 7-year-old. You've never handled this particular 7-year-old. Is that a yes?" He looked at the Seattle file, looked at his phone, looked out the window at a city doing its ordinary morning things. "Yes," he typed. 6:30. "I'll text you the address." He told Noah at pickup. He kept it simple. A friend is coming to dinner tonight. Someone from work, and watched Noah's face do the calculation that 7-year-olds do when adults use words like friend with a specific kind of careful neutrality. "Is she nice?" Noah asked. "Yes," Daniel said. "Does she know about the Lego cities?" "She knows you're building a space colony." Noah absorbed this with the seriousness of someone reviewing a credential. "Okay," he said. "She can come." Victoria arrived at 6:32. Daniel opened the door, and she was standing there in the hallway with a jacket over her arm and a paper bag from the bakery, 2 blocks from the office, the good one. The one with the croissants that Noah had once declared the best thing he had ever eaten, and then immediately revised to second best after Lego, which was Daniel had told him a completely reasonable ranking. And she looked for a fractional moment like someone who had prepared thoroughly for something and was now slightly terrified of it anyway. "Hi," she said. The word arrived without her usual architecture around it. Just hi. "Hi," he said, and stepped back to let her in. Noah was at the kitchen table, with a section of the space colony spread across it, the launch pad quadrant, based on the configuration of red pieces. And he looked up when she came in, with the direct assessing gaze that Daniel recognized as the same expression he'd been told he himself made, and had never quite believed until he saw it on his son's face. "You're the friend," Noah said. "I am," she said. She didn't crouch down to his level, the way some adults did, the performative gesture of trying to seem less tall. She just stood at normal height and looked at him. "You must be Noah." "Yes," he said. "What's in the bag?" "Noah," Daniel said. "Croissants," she said. "From the place on Aldridge, the chocolate ones." Noah's expression shifted from assessment to something significantly more favorable. "Those are the best ones," he said. "Did my dad tell you that?" "No," she said. "I just know what's good." Noah looked at her for another moment. Then he looked at Daniel. Then back at her. "You can sit down," he said with the magnanimity of someone granting access to a space they fully controlled. "But don't touch the red pieces. That's the launch pad, and it's structural." "Understood," she said, and sat down. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway and watched Victoria Hale, who had navigated boardrooms and investor calls and corporate crises, with the steady nerve of someone who had been cold under pressure for so long it had become her resting state, sit across from a 7-year-old and look at a Lego space colony with complete and genuine attention. "Why is the launch pad on the east side?" she asked. Noah looked at her with sharp surprise. "Because the prevailing wind simulation from my weather app goes west," he said. "So launches go with the wind, not against it. It's more efficient." She nodded slowly. "That's correct," she said. "That's actually how real launch facilities are sited." Noah's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "How do you know that?" "I sit on the board of an aerospace company," she said. "We've funded 2 launch facilities. Real ones with real rockets. Real ones with real rockets." Noah turned to Daniel with an expression that could only be described as, "Why didn't you tell me this?" And Daniel spread his hands in a gesture of innocent surprise, which was only partially performed because he had not in fact anticipated this particular development. "Can I ask you something?" Noah said, turning back to Victoria. "Yes," she said. "Do you think dogs could survive in a space colony with the right pressure suits?" She considered this with visible seriousness. "With the right engineering," she said. "I think dogs could survive almost anywhere." Noah sat back with the expression of a person who has just received a verdict they were hoping for. "That's what I said," he told Daniel. "Exactly that." "I know," Daniel said. "I remember." Dinner was simple pasta because it was a Thursday, and Thursdays were pasta, a rule Noah had established, and Daniel had adopted without remembering when it had become official, and Victoria ate it at the kitchen table with Noah talking continuously about the space colony and the aerospace implications of a 7-planet system he was developing for reasons that were internally consistent and entirely his own. She listened, really listened, not the polite performance of listening that adults did with children, the nodding and the mild smiles and the waiting for the child to finish, but actual engagement, actual questions, tracking the internal logic of Noah's system and pushing on it gently when it had gaps. At one point she said, "If you have 7 planets, you need a central hub for trade. Where is it?" Noah froze. "I didn't think of that," he said. "Most architects don't on the first version," she said. "You add it in the second draft." Noah immediately began moving pieces. Daniel cleared the plates and watched from the sink and felt something happen in his chest that he didn't have a clean name for. Not romance, or not only romance, but something prior to that, something more fundamental. The recognition of a person who fit into a space without forcing it, who did not perform ease but simply had it here in this kitchen, with his son's space colony spread across the table and the ordinary Tuesday evening light of a life that looked exactly like itself. After Noah was in bed later than usual because the hub discussion had extended significantly, Daniel came back to the kitchen where Victoria was standing at the counter with a glass of water, looking at nothing in particular, with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. "He's extraordinary," she said. "I know," Daniel said. "He has your precision, the way he thinks about the wind and the launch sighting. That's not a 7-year-old thing. That's a him thing. He has his mother's eyes," Daniel said. "And her stubbornness. The precision might be mine. The empathy is definitely hers." She looked at him. "Tell me about her," she said. "Claire." Nobody asked him that directly anymore. Rachel sometimes circled it. Greg never approached it. The people at work didn't know. He had built the wall high enough and thick enough that the question had stopped arriving. He leaned against the counter, thought about where to start. And then, because this was a woman who had sat on his kitchen floor and engaged with genuine seriousness about the structural requirements of a Lego space colony, he decided to start at the actual beginning. "She was a pediatric nurse," he said. "We met when Noah was sick at 2-0 serious, a respiratory thing, but it was the middle of the night, and I was a wreck because I was alone with him and his temperature spiked and I didn't know what I was doing. She was the nurse on shift. She was so—" He paused, found the right word. "Calm. Not cold. Just steady. Like she had enough calm for both of us and had decided to share it." He looked at his water glass. "I asked her to dinner 3 weeks later. She said yes after I asked twice, because she said the first ask was too nervous and she wanted to know if I'd try again." Victoria smiled, small and real. "She died of an aneurysm," he said. 41 years old, no warning. She went to work, and she didn't come back. He said it the way he always said it, stripped of performance, just the fact. "I was at the office. Noah was at daycare. The hospital called Greg because he was in my emergency contacts, and Greg drove to get me because he knew I shouldn't drive, and he has never once talked about that day, and I have never once thanked him for it, and those are 2 things I think about sometimes." Victoria was very still. "She would have liked Noah's space colony," he said. "She would have asked about the dogs immediately. She would have agreed with his answer." "She sounds like someone worth missing," Victoria said quietly. "Every day," he said. Less loud than it used to be, but every day. She set her water glass down, turned to face him fully. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Yes. When James died, my fiancé." She said the name carefully, the way you say something you rarely say out loud. "The worst part wasn't the grief. The grief was enormous, but it was grief has a shape. You can feel where it ends, even if the ending is very far away." She looked at the table. "The worst part was that I stopped trusting the future. Every time I started to plan something, some part of me would say, 'You planned before. You planned a wedding. You planned a life, and the plan became nothing in the space of one afternoon. So I stopped planning things I cared about." She looked back at him. "I only planned things I didn't care about. That way there was nothing to lose." "The company," he said. "The company," she confirmed. "The restructuring, the expansion, the board, the revenue. I cared about doing it well. I didn't care about the outcome in the way that hurts when it's taken." She paused. "Until about 3 days ago." The kitchen was very quiet. Noah was asleep. The city was doing its nighttime things outside. "This is terrifying," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I don't say that as a warning or a condition, just as information. This is the most frightened I have been in 6 years." "Why?" he asked. "Because I care about the outcome," she said. "Already. After 3 days. That's not safe. That's not the managed, controlled, low-risk version of things that I have been living inside." She met his eyes. "You have a son who just explained planetary trade routes to me and asked me about pressure-suited dogs with complete sincerity, and I am already in this. That's what I'm telling you. I'm already in this. He looked at her for a long moment. At the woman who had grabbed his arm in a hallway and asked a question she couldn't take back and had driven to a sidewalk at 9 o'clock and eaten pasta at a kitchen table and argued seriously about launch sighting with a 7-year-old and was now standing in his kitchen telling him the truth with no armor anywhere on her. So am I, he said. She exhaled. A long, slow breath that sounded like something released. Okay, she said. Okay. There are complications, he said. Real ones. The company. The structure. I know. I need to think about Noah in every decision I make. That's not flexible. I know that too, she said. I'm not asking you to change the shape of your life, Daniel. I'm asking... She stopped. Started again. I'm asking if there's room, in the shape of it, for something that isn't scheduled and isn't controlled and might be... A pause. Might be worth the risk of caring about. He looked at her. Is there? She asked. He thought about the elevator. About 4 words and 5 words and closing doors. About a blind date that ended cleanly and a sidewalk at 9 o'clock and a woman with her hair down who drove across the city for no professional reason and asked his son real questions about real things and ate pasta on a Thursday like it was the most natural thing. He thought about Claire, who had asked him to try again when the first ask was too nervous. He thought about Noah, who had said I won't be weird about it with 7 years' worth of grace. Yes, he said. There's room. She looked at him with something that was not managed and was not performed and had no armor in it at all. Just a person standing in a kitchen, having arrived somewhere she hadn't planned to arrive, finding that the arrival was exactly right. Good, she said softly. That's good. He walked her to the door. She put on her jacket. At the doorway she turned and she was close enough that he could see the specific way her expression had changed over 3 days, the specific degree to which the wall had come down, and how much more real she looked without it. Daniel, she said. Yeah. For what it's worth. A pause. The answer to the question I asked in the hallway. He waited. It was never about comparison, she said. I think I knew that when I said it. I just didn't know what else the question was yet. He looked at her. What is it now? She held his gaze. It's about who stays, she said quietly. That's all it ever was. Who stays? She walked down the hallway. He stood in the doorway and watched her go. At the elevator, she turned once briefly, and their eyes met across the distance. The way they had across the floor, through a corner office window, measured and real, and neither of them looking away first. The elevator came. She stepped in. He went back inside, closed the door, and stood in the quiet of his apartment, the space colony on the kitchen table, the half-finished glass of water, the ordinary, honest shape of a life that was for the first time in 3 years, making room for something it hadn't scheduled and couldn't control. He picked up his phone. Typed one line. He wants to know if you can come back Saturday. He has questions about the hub. Her reply came before he'd set the phone down. Tell him I'll bring the croissants. And then tell him yes. Saturday arrived the way good things sometimes do, quietly, without announcement, without the weight of expectation that ruins things before they start. Daniel was up at 6:30 because that was when he was always up, routine being the architecture of a life that had needed architecture. He made coffee. He looked at the space colony on the kitchen table, which Noah had expanded overnight somehow. In the 20 minutes between waking up and breakfast, an entire residential district had appeared on the eastern edge, and he thought about the fact that Victoria was coming at 10, and felt something that was not anxiety, and was not excitement, but was somewhere in the honest territory between them. Noah came out at 7 in his pajamas, with his hair sideways, and his expression already fully operational, which was one of the things about his son that still surprised him. No warm-up period, no slow emergence into consciousness, just Noah fully present and already thinking about something. Is she coming today? He asked. 10 o'clock, Daniel said. Noah looked at the space colony, made a small adjustment to a blue piece near the hub. I have questions prepared, he said. Of course you do. About the trade routes, and about whether a space colony would need a hospital or if they'd use telemedicine. Daniel poured his coffee. That's a very specific question. Ms. Patterson said telemedicine is the future, Noah said. I want to know if Victoria agrees. It was the first time Noah had used her name. Not your friend or the lady, but her name naturally, like it had already been filed in the category of people who existed reliably in his world. Daniel registered it and said nothing, and drank his coffee. She arrived at 10:03 with the croissants, and also unexpectedly a flat rectangular box under her arm that she held with the careful deliberateness of someone transporting something fragile. Noah opened the door before Daniel reached it. You're 3 minutes late, Noah said. I know, she said. Traffic on Aldridge. My dad is always exactly on time. Your dad is exceptional, she said. I'm working on it. Noah assessed this answer, found it satisfactory, stepped back to let her in. His eyes went immediately to the box. What's that? She looked at Daniel first. A quick look, a checking-in look, the kind that asked permission without asking it out loud. He nodded barely. She crouched down to Noah's level, not the performative crouch of the first night, but easy and natural now, and held the box out. I know someone who works on the engineering team for an aerospace company, she said. I called him yesterday and asked him to send something. Noah took the box, opened it. Inside was a laminated architectural diagram. A real one. A cross-section schematic of an actual proposed space habitat cylindrical, labeled with living quarters and agricultural rings, and a docking hub marked in clean engineering notation. Noah stared at it. That's a real proposal, Victoria said. From a real engineering team. They've been working on it for 6 years. It's not built yet, but the math is real. Noah looked at the diagram. Looked at his space colony on the kitchen table. Looked at the diagram again. Something happened in his face that Daniel had only seen a few times, a kind of silent, complete astonishment, the expression of a person encountering something that confirms what they already believed was possible. Their hub is in the center, Noah said. Yes. Mine is on the east side. I saw that Thursday. Do you think theirs is better? She considered it seriously. I think theirs is more conventional, she said. Yours has a logic to it that theirs doesn't account for. The wind sighting principle could apply to internal atmospheric circulation in a closed system. That's an interesting problem. Noah looked at her with an expression that was no longer assessment. It was something past assessment, something that had decided. You can sit on the floor, he said. If you want to look at it closer. She sat on the floor. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway with his coffee and watched Victoria Hale sit cross-legged on his living room floor with a 7-year-old and a Lego space colony and a real aerospace schematic, and felt something move through him that he recognized after a moment as the specific sensation of a future becoming imaginable. He had not had that sensation in 3 years. He had not known he was missing it until it arrived. They were on the floor for 2 hours. Daniel brought more coffee and then orange juice for Noah, and at some point, he sat down on the couch above them and listened to a conversation about atmospheric pressure and hospital logistics, and whether the space colony's dogs would need their own pressurized zone or could share with humans, which Victoria argued they could given the right filtration, and Noah argued required separation for behavioral reasons. And the debate was conducted with complete mutual seriousness and no resolution, which both of them seemed satisfied with. At noon, Daniel made lunch. Simple things. Noah set the table with the focused ceremony he brought to tasks he considered important, which was most tasks. They ate. Noah talked. Victoria listened and asked, and pushed back when the logic had gaps, which Noah had already recognized as her method, and had adapted to with the flexibility of a person who was genuinely interested in getting things right rather than being right. At one point, Victoria said, "Noah, can I ask you something?" "Yes," he said through a mouthful of sandwich which Daniel noted and let pass. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" "A space colony architect," he said, "and maybe a therapist." She glanced at Daniel. He spread his hands in a small gesture of confirmation. He has high emotional IQ, he said. His teacher said so. Ms. Patterson, Noah added. She's right about most things. She was wrong about the telemedicine question, but she's right about most things. He looked at Victoria. Do you think space colonies would use telemedicine? With the right bandwidth infrastructure, she said, yes. Though they'd also need at least one on-site physician for emergencies. Telemedicine has latency issues at interplanetary distances. Noah pointed at her with his sandwich. That's what I said. Exactly. You're a good thinker, she said. I know, he said. Which was not arrogance, just a 7-year-old who had been told a true thing and stored it as information rather than as pride. After lunch, Noah returned to the space colony with the renewed focus of someone who had received useful intelligence and needed to apply it. Daniel cleared the plates. Victoria brought her glass to the sink and stood beside him, and they washed up in the domestic quiet of people who had been doing this together much longer than 3 days, and the ease of it was something neither of them mentioned, because mentioning it would make it fragile. He's going to be something, she said quietly, not loud enough for Noah to hear. I know, Daniel said, not because of the intelligence. Lots of people are intelligent. She dried a plate. Because of the way he thinks about other people. The telemedicine question, that's not engineering curiosity. He's thinking about the people who'd need care. He's thinking about what it would feel like to be sick, far from everything familiar. She looked at the plate in her hands. That comes from somewhere specific. His mother, Daniel said. She thought like that, about the person inside the situation, not just the situation. Victoria set the plate down. He got the best of both of you, she said. Daniel looked at her. You didn't have to come today, he said. Thursday night we said what we said. You didn't have to follow up with a diagram from an aerospace engineer. I know, she said. Why did you? She turned to face him, leaned back against the counter in the posture of someone who had decided to stop managing the distance. Because I spent 6 years not following up, she said, on anything that mattered. I was very good at the first move, showing up to things, saying the right thing, performing the appropriate version of present. And then I would... She stopped. Found the exact word. Retreat. Back behind the wall. Where everything was manageable and nothing could cost me anything. She looked at him steadily. Thursday night in your doorway, I said something true, and I drove home, and I sat in my apartment, and I thought, if I don't follow up on this, if I let the wall come back up, I will regret it for the rest of my life. And I have had enough regret. I have stored enough of it. She held his gaze. So I called the engineer at 7 in the morning and asked for the diagram. He looked at her for a long moment. You called an aerospace engineer at 7 a.m. on a Friday, he said, to get a space habitat schematic for a 7-year-old. Yes. He must have had questions. He did, she said. I told him it was personal. He'd never heard me say that word before. He sent the diagram in 20 minutes. Daniel almost laughed. The real version, the one he kept catching before it happened. This time he let it go. She watched it happen. Watched his face do something it had not done in front of her before fully, without the careful management, and something in her own face answered it the same unguarded quality, two people forgetting simultaneously to maintain the appropriate distance. From the living room. Dad, the hub needs to move. Move it, Daniel called back. I need your opinion first. You have Victoria's opinion. It's better than mine on this specific topic. A pause. Then, Victoria, hub location question. She pushed off the counter and walked back into the living room, and Daniel stood at the sink for a moment and looked out the window at the ordinary Saturday afternoon city and felt full. That was the word. Not happy, because happy was too simple and too fleeting, and he had learned not to trust things that were too simple. But full. The specific grounded fullness of a life that had real things in it, real people, real weight. He went back to the living room. Noah got sick at 4:15. It came on the way. These things came on with children, no warning, no preamble, just a small hand on Daniel's arm, and a face that had gone from operational to pale in the span of minutes. "My stomach," Noah said. Daniel had his hand on Noah's forehead before the sentence was finished. Warm. Not alarming, but real. He steered him to the couch with the practiced efficiency of a man who had done this alone enough times to have a system. "Lie down," he said. "I'll get the thermometer." He looked at Victoria. She was already moving not toward the door, not toward her jacket, but toward the kitchen. "Where's the thermometer?" she asked. "Cabinet above the microwave," he said, already moving toward Noah. "Left side." She found it. Brought it. He took Noah's temperature 101 enough to be uncomfortable, not enough to be frightening, and sat on the edge of the couch, and Noah curled toward him with the specific gravity of a sick child seeking the nearest warm thing. "Sorry," Noah said. "Don't apologize for being sick," Daniel said. "I was going to show Victoria the East Residential District." "She's seen it," Daniel said. "She'll see it again." Victoria sat on the other end of the couch, not at a distance close within reach, with the matter-of-fact presence of someone who had decided that proximity was the appropriate response and saw no reason to perform uncertainty about it. "Does your stomach hurt a lot or a medium?" she asked Noah. "Medium," he said. "Like a 6. 6 is manageable," she said. "How do you know?" "I had a lot of 6-level situations in boardrooms," she said. "You get through them." Noah almost smiled. "Boardrooms aren't the same as stomachs." "The principle is similar," she said. "You breathe through it, and you don't make it bigger than it is, and you let the people around you help." Noah looked at her from his position curled against Daniel's side, the gray eyes calm now, slightly glassy with the mild fever. "Are you scared of anything?" he asked. She met his eyes without flinching. "Yes," she said. "What?" She glanced at Daniel, a brief, honest glance. "Losing people I care about," she said. "That's the thing I'm most scared of." Noah absorbed this. "Me too," he said. "I was scared when Dad got a cold last winter." "I was fine," Daniel said. "It could have been worse," Noah said with the conviction of someone who had done the research. He looked at Victoria. "Do you have people that you care about?" She looked at the question directly, the way she looked at everything clearly, without the softening reflex. "I'm working on it," she said. Noah looked at his father, looked at Victoria. The calculation he was running was visible in his face, 7 years old, and already reading rooms, reading people, reading the specific frequency of the air between two adults who were trying not to announce what they were to each other. "Okay," he said, and settled back against Daniel's side with the acceptance of someone who had gotten the information they needed. Daniel brought him ginger ale and crackers and the specific blanket. The blue one, not the gray one. A distinction that mattered enormously and was non-negotiable, and Victoria stayed. She didn't ask if she should go. She didn't hover or perform concern. She just stayed on the end of the couch, close enough to be present and quiet enough not to crowd the space that a sick child and his father needed. At some point, Noah fell asleep. The fever had settled, the ginger ale had helped, and the deep, specific exhaustion of a child's body, fighting something minor, had pulled him under. Daniel tucked the blue blanket around him and stood up carefully, and Victoria stood too, and they moved to the kitchen without speaking, the way people move when someone is sleeping nearby. Daniel leaned against the counter. "You stayed," he said. "Yes." "You didn't have to." "Daniel." She said his name with a patience that was not impatience, just clarity. "You have to stop telling me I didn't have to do things. I know I didn't have to. That's the entire point. I'm choosing to. Those are different." He looked at her. "I'm not used to that," he said. "Someone choosing to." "I know," she said. "I could tell the first day. The way you move through the building like you've pre-negotiated every interaction, so that nothing costs more than you can afford to pay alone." She held his gaze. "You've been doing everything alone for so long that someone choosing to show up reads as an anomaly. Something to explain away." He didn't say anything. "I'm not an anomaly," she said. "I'm a person who drove to a sidewalk and brought aerospace schematics and sat on your floor and stayed when your son got sick. That's not an anomaly. That's just what I want to do." She crossed her arms, not defensively, just holding herself together around something true. "What I want, Daniel." Present tense, which is not something I have said about something personal in 6 years. He looked at her for a long time. At the woman who had spent 6 years building a wall high enough to keep everything safe and had, in the space of 4 days, voluntarily taken it apart piece by piece and handed him the pieces without apology. "Victoria," he said. "Yes. I need to tell you something." She waited. The day Claire died, he said, I sat in the hospital parking lot for 2 hours before I could drive. I wasn't crying. I was just trying to figure out how a person moves forward when the thing they built their life around is gone. He paused. I decided sitting there that the answer was routine, structure. Control the things you can control and don't ask too much of the things you can't. He looked at his hands. That worked. For 3 years it worked. Noah is okay. I am functional. The life we have is a good life. It is, she said quietly. But it was also... He stopped. Found it. Sealed. I sealed it without meaning to. And the seal became the structure, and the structure became the thing I was protecting, and somewhere in there I stopped being able to tell the difference between protecting Noah and protecting myself from the risk of caring about something again. He looked at her. And then 4 days ago, I said 4 words in a hallway, and a woman grabbed my arm and asked me an impossible question, and I have not been inside the seal since. She was very still. I don't know where this goes, he said. I can't promise you anything about what it looks like or what it becomes. There are real complications. The company is a real complication. Noah is not a complication, but he is the center of every decision I make, and that will not change. I know, she said. I'm not asking you to make promises. I'm not asking for a plan. She uncrossed her arms, stood straight. I'm just asking you to let me be in it. Whatever it is. The actual shape of your life, the pasta on Thursdays and the Lego cities and the 5:15 departure and the sick days and all of it. Her voice was steady and clear and had nothing performed in it. I want to be in the actual thing, not the managed version, the real one. He looked at her, and then he crossed the kitchen. Not dramatically, just the 3 steps it took. And he took her face in both hands the way a man holds something he has decided to stop being careful about, and he kissed her. She made a small sound, not surprise recognition, like something that had been moving toward this for 4 days had finally arrived at where it was going. When they separated, she kept her eyes closed for a moment. He kept his hands where they were framing her face and watched her open her eyes and look at him with the specific expression of someone who has just confirmed something they already knew and is still staggered by the confirmation. Okay, she said softly. Okay. Okay, he said. From the living room, barely audible, a small, sleepy voice. Dad? He dropped his hands. Yeah, buddy. Can I have more ginger ale? Yeah. He looked at Victoria. She was smiling, the full version, the one that changed her face entirely, the one that had no armor in it and didn't need any. Come help me with the ginger ale, he said. I know where the glasses are, she said. She did. She went directly to the right cabinet, poured the ginger ale with the matter-of-fact ease of someone who was already at home in a space, and carried it to the living room and handed it to Noah with a steady hand and a quiet, "Here you go." And Noah took it and drank it and looked at her and said with the guileless precision of a 7-year-old who had made up his mind, "Are you my dad's girlfriend?" The kitchen went very quiet. Victoria glanced at Daniel. Daniel looked at Noah with the expression of a man who had no script for this and was going to have to survive on honesty. That's a grown-up question, Daniel said. I'm almost 8, Noah said. In 5 months. Still almost. He looked at Victoria, waited with the patience of someone who had learned that adults needed a moment. Victoria crouched down to his level. Your dad and I are figuring that out, she said. But I like him, and I like you, and I like this space colony, and I'm going to keep coming around if that's okay with you. Noah looked at her, turned to his father, turned back. Okay, he said. But you have to come next Saturday too. The hub still needs work. I'll be here, she said. With croissants. With croissants. Noah nodded satisfied and pulled the blue blanket back around himself with the finality of someone who had resolved the matter and was ready to return to resting. She left at 7. Noah was asleep again properly, this time the deep, even breathing of a child whose body had done what it needed to do and shut down for maintenance. Daniel walked her to the door. In the hallway she put on her jacket, and he leaned against the doorframe, and they looked at each other in the ordinary light of a Saturday evening that had become something neither of them had planned. Monday, she said. Monday, he agreed. It'll be different. At the office. Yes, we'll need to figure that out. We will, he said. Not tonight. Not tonight, she said. A pause. I'm going to tell HR before anyone else. Whatever we decide this is, I want it to be clean, on record, protected for both of us. He looked at her. You've already thought about that. I've been thinking about it since Thursday, she said. I'm a CEO, Daniel. I plan things. Even the things I didn't plan on, I eventually plan. The corner of her mouth moved. It's a condition. I've noticed, he said. She looked at him in the doorway of his apartment on a Saturday night with a sick child asleep inside and a space colony on the kitchen table, and 3 days of accumulated honesty between them that had rearranged something fundamental in both of their lives without asking permission. You know what I keep thinking about, she said. Tell me. That question, in the elevator doorway. She held his eyes. I've been thinking about why I said it, what I was actually asking. A pause. And I think what I was asking was whether there was someone who saw you, the actual you, not the file, not the performance review, not the man who leaves at 5:15. Whether there was someone in your life who knew what it cost you and stayed anyway. Her voice was quiet and clear. And the answer to that question was no. And something in me, before I could stop it, decided it wanted to be yes. He looked at her for a long moment. It is now, he said. She nodded. Just once. The smallest possible acknowledgement of the largest possible thing. Good night, Daniel, she said. Good night. She walked down the hallway. At the elevator, she turned just once the way she had turned before and looked at him across the distance, and he looked back, and neither of them looked away first. The elevator came. She stepped in. The doors closed. He stood in his doorway for a moment. Then he went inside. Checked on Noah, still asleep, temperature down, face peaceful, one hand curled loosely around the edge of the blue blanket. He stood there in the dark of his son's room and breathed in the quiet, particular smell of a child sleeping and felt the weight and the goodness of it settle through him. He went to his own room, sat on the edge of his bed, picked up his phone. One text, sent 6 minutes ago. Thank you for today. All of it. He typed back, thank you for staying, her reply. That's the easy part. He put the phone down, lay back, looked at the ceiling in the dark. 3 years ago, he had sat in a hospital parking lot and asked himself how a person moves forward when the foundation is gone. He had answered the question with routine, with structure, with 5:15 departures, and macaroni on Thursdays and Lego cities, and the careful, loving construction of a life that could hold what remained. He had built something real. He knew that now, in a way, he hadn't let himself know it before, because something real was capable of growing, of expanding, of making room for something new without losing its shape. The foundation was not gone. It had just been waiting for the next thing it was meant to hold. A woman had grabbed his arm in a hallway and asked a question she couldn't take back, and the answer had never been about comparison. It had never been about who was better, or who was more, or who measured up to what. It had always been about one thing: who stays. And for the first time in 3 years, standing in the full and ordinary and extraordinary life he had built, from the pieces of what survived. Daniel Mercer knew without question, without condition, without the managed distance of a man protecting himself from the cost of caring. She was going to stay. And so was he.